Sometimes, when you're genuinely trying to grow in your own life, it does not feel like progress. It does not feel like you're moving ahead with certainty. Instead, it can feel like you're slowly letting go of the person that you used to be. The steady parts of your life, the routines that shaped your days, the friendships that once felt natural, even the way you experienced love, can begin to feel slightly unfamiliar. Not necessarily broken, not suddenly wrong, just different in a way that is hard to fully explain. And somewhere in that quiet shift, you may find yourself asking a simple but unsettling question. If this is growth, why does it feel like I'm losing everything? In this video, we're going to explore that feeling. We'll break down why growth can feel like loss, why shifting priorities makes familiar things feel distant, and what's really going on when you're caught between who you were and who you're becoming. Welcome to the Glitch Cult. This is where we make sense of the internal conflicts that most of us carry but rarely speak about. There is a stage in growth that people rarely explain properly. Not the exciting beginning where motivation is high, not the visible end where results speak for themselves, but the middle, the transition phase, where your old way of living starts changing before your new life has fully taken shape. Growth is usually described as improvement, but when you actually go through it, it feels more like reorganization of your whole life. At some point, you make a serious decision that something long-term matters more than what feels immediately comfortable. And once that decision becomes real, your daily structure begins to shift because your time, your energy, and the focus you can give in a day are limited. You cannot keep investing equally in everything once your priorities change. So when one direction becomes important, you naturally reduce your involvement somewhere else. That reduction is not dramatic. It does not always look like a big sacrifice. It might mean you step back from habits that gave you quick comfort. It might mean you say no to things that you would have agreed to without thinking before. These are small adjustments from the outside, but internally they are significant. Your previous life had a certain predictability. You knew how your days felt. You knew what to expect from yourself. You knew what kind of emotional rewards would show up in your routine. Even if that routine was not perfect, it was familiar. And familiarity gives the mind a sense of control. When you choose growth, you begin letting go of parts of that familiarity. You stop engaging in some of the habits that once defined your free time. You change how you respond to certain situations. You become more selective about where your attention goes. The old pattern does not disappear overnight, but you stop feeding it with the same consistency. And this is important. Identity is built through repetition. If you do something consistently for years, it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like part of who you are. So when you reduce those repeated behaviors, even slightly, your sense of self begins to feel different. You may not feel like the same version of yourself in certain environments. You may notice that conversations or situations that once felt natural now feel slightly misaligned. That unfamiliar feeling is often interpreted as loss. At the same time, you're trying to build something new. You have a vision of a more aligned version of your life. Maybe more disciplined, more stable, more intentional. That vision feels meaningful when you think about it. It makes sense logically, but it is not yet visible in your reality. So this is the real transition. You are letting go of the structure that once felt stable, before the new structure has fully formed. You are reducing your attachment to old patterns before you can clearly experience the benefits of the new ones. And that gap creates psychological tension. You are putting effort into something without guarantees. You are changing your routine before results confirm that the change was worth it. You are giving up certain comforts before you gain long-term stability. In that period, it can genuinely feel like you're standing on unstable ground. Your mind prefers what it can measure. It prefers routines that confirm your identity. It prefers predictable emotional rewards. So when you remove some of that predictability and replace it with effort, whose results are still uncertain, the mind reacts as if something valuable has been taken away. And in a sense, something has. You have given up immediate comfort. You have stepped away from automatic pleasure. You have reduced the ease of staying the same. But what you are building is not yet solid enough to reassure you. So the experience feels unbalanced, like you are losing parts of your life without clearly seeing what is replacing them. This is why growth can feel like losing everything. Not because everything is gone, but because you're actively letting go of what was familiar, while still waiting for what is meaningful to become real. The old structure is no longer fully supporting you. The new structure is not yet strong enough to hold you. Most people retreat during this stage, not because they lack ambition, but because this uncertainty feels unsafe. Going back to the old rhythm restores predictability. Predictability restores emotional calm, but it also restores the same results. Growth asks you to tolerate this transition phase, the period where you are consciously releasing one version of yourself before the next version is fully stable. And that process rarely feels like progress in the moment. It feels like uncertainty, instability, and a complete identity loss. But what is actually happening is restructuring. You are not losing everything. You are reorganizing your life around a different priority. And reorganization always feels uncomfortable before it feels rewarding. There's another part of growth that people do not often describe clearly. Growth can feel lonely, not dramatic loneliness, not isolation in an extreme sense, but a quiet kind of loneliness that shows up when your priorities begin to change. When you choose growth, you are usually choosing something that does not give immediate results. You're choosing a direction that may take 1 year, 2 years, sometimes longer. During that time, the work often looks repetitive. You wake up and do the same disciplined thing again. You show up even on days when you do not feel inspired. You continue even when the progress is not obvious. That kind of consistency separates growth from excitement. Excitement is temporary. Growth is steady repetition. And steady repetition can feel lonely because not everyone around you will be moving at the same pace or in the same direction. When you begin dedicating time and energy to something specific, your life naturally becomes more structured. You may protect your time more carefully. You may say no more often. You may reduce distractions that once filled your day. From the outside, this can look like withdrawal. From the inside, it feels like focus. But focus has a cost. If you are serious about building something, whether it is a skill, a career shift, a healthier body, or a long-term goal, you cannot treat it casually. You have to maintain a certain standard. That standard might include working on days when you are tired. It might include delaying short-term pleasure. It might include accepting uncertainty because the result is not guaranteed. Growth is uncertain by nature. There is no full guarantee that effort will produce the exact outcome you imagine. But there is a clear pattern in life. Consistent effort over time increases the probability of progress. If you follow a skill consistently for 1 or 2 years, your chances of becoming competent rise significantly, compared to someone who tries only occasionally. This is not motivational thinking. It is simply how practice works. However, while you are building that probability, your emotional side may struggle. You may feel like you are sacrificing something. Time with friends may reduce. Certain comforts may decrease. Some relationships may not adapt to your new routine. The old version of your life may slowly fade. This fading can feel like loss. It can feel like you are giving up connection in exchange for possibility. That trade does not always feel fair in the moment. On some days, you may question whether the dedication is worth the discomfort. This is where many people stop. They sense the loneliness. They sense the distance forming. They sense that their current path requires endurance. And instead of tolerating that temporary isolation, they return to familiar patterns. Familiar patterns feel easier because they require less discipline and less uncertainty. But if you continue, something subtle happens. The loneliness does not disappear immediately, but it becomes clearer. You begin to understand that the temporary distance is part of building something that did not exist before. You also begin to see that sacrifice is not permanent loss. It is temporary prioritization. There is an important distinction here. Sacrifice does not mean destruction. It means choosing one thing over another for a period of time. If you dedicate 2 years to growth, it does not mean you can never return to relationships, rest, or balance. It means you are structuring your life differently for a while. Life does not move in a straight line. It moves in phases. Some phases require intensity. Others allow integration. Growth can feel like you are alone on a path, but it also carries a possibility. If the effort compounds, if the consistency holds, you may eventually reach a point where the vision you once imagined begins to feel real. That possibility is not guaranteed, but it is realistic enough to justify the effort. And understanding that difference between loneliness as permanent isolation and loneliness as a temporary phase of focus changes how growth feels. It may still be uncomfortable, but becomes understandable. Maybe this phase is not something to escape, but something to live through consciously. There are moments in life that ask more from you than comfort ever did. They ask for consistency, patience, and a willingness to change parts of yourself that no longer align with your vision. If you are in such a moment, it may help to see it not as punishment, but as preparation, not as isolation, but as a period where you are shaping a version of yourself that you can respect in your own eyes. That does not require perfection. It requires honesty about what you are building and why.